Futurama comic, issue 39. Fry talks to a doll of Bart at a carnival, and somehow when he's unrealistically told that the ring tossing game is rigged by the person in charge of it, who's probably gonna be seen after this issue anyways despite what his doctor said, he throws the ring anyways. At least it's explained why he'll be seen after this because Zoidberg was his doctor and somehow got decades and hours confused. I assume he tells him this afterwards. Bender gets asked by someone if he wants him to guess his age, and if he's wrong, he'll get a free case of beer. He can see Bender's manufacture date on him, so he guesses that he was built 10 years ago. Of course, while Bender references that episode of the show that resulted in him being thousands of years old, he doesn't believe him, and says he'll have to settle this the old-fashioned way, with a trial. The fat lady is the bearded lady who shaved for the trial. It's a kangaroo court, so he gets an attorney who isn't qualified and says Bender's guilty. Out of nowhere, Farnsworth shows up with a device that can tell any object's age through carbon speed dating, which reveals that Bender's materials are over 27,000 years old, because of time travel related adventures too complicated to explain here. Bender thanks him and shakes his hand. Farnsworth fires him because he's well past retirement age. But didn't he know he was thousands of years old before this? Wouldn't he know that he's necessary to the crew because of his extendable arms and legs, metal body, bending ability, fire breath, and chest compartment that he insists on putting random stuff in? Since when does he follow the rules just because? He makes doomsday devices. He won't get rid of the crew's bodyguard. It would at least make sense if he said he was replacing him with a different Bender. Bender says that since he's retired, he's gonna sell the gold watch he stole from the professor and then yell at kids to get off his lawn. He doesn't have one and guilts Fry into getting one. He says the landlady isn't gonna like it though. Bender is wearing reading glasses to look ridiculous and thanks him, humorously trying to talk like an old person. He tells Fry to get off his lawn for fun and says he's off to the park to give his opinions about the weather to random strangers. He'll jump at any excuse to have some new fun, even if it makes him look bad. A mother wishes her kid happy birthday and calls her sweetie, and then Bender ruins the moment going to their house trying to steal her gifts. He makes up the excuse that he's in their home because he's senile and has no idea where he is. There's no reason they'd believe him, because he's a robot, and he's not using Farnsworth's age detecting device on himself. Somehow the mother humors him, telling him to stay as long as he wants. Then Hermes gets hit by a hula hoop, though we don't see it impact him. And he says a silly interjection of the future, and Fry says he needs to practice throwing hula hoops to impress Leela. She heard the last two words, and he somehow lies that he meant to depress Leela when she'd hear him just fine. She asks him why he'd want that, and he says a blatant lie she'd see through and practices his hula hooping in front of her, so she leaves judgmentally. Bender reveals he's been showing his senior discount card to people on the bus a lot, and brags that he can get anyone to give up their seat for him. Somehow he chooses the blind and pregnant woman, and at least it was amusing that he said, "I'm pretty sure I had nothing to do with either of those things." Then he's told he's going to be taken to the near-Death Star retirement community, despite being a clearly physically fit robot. So he gets dragged away as I'm depressed by them referencing that idea from the show. Fry tells Leela they have to help Bender escape from a planet in another galaxy, which is the third time this month. At least he's trying to make up for the dark stuff with believable levity. But it really would be smarter if Farnsworth just replaced them with a new Bender. But somehow the crew is too attached to the old Bender, doesn't want to give up on him. Bender's put in a simulation full of old people in a neighborhood. Leela says that the professor took a few days to invent a new cloaking device, and we see the ship covered with a white blanket. She says that since robots don't believe in ghosts, their logic processing doesn't register seeing them, and they can easily walk past them just like ghosts, somehow. At least until the costume gets snagged on an air vent and they have to run anyways. They would just work like people do and see them as people in costumes. The guards are old people who volunteered to be made guards instead of retiring. At least they have a choice. But Bender wasn't told he could be one of those guys. I guess all the guard jobs are filled right now, so that's why Bender wasn't told he could do this. Since Fry and Leela will be old enough to be here one day, that's somehow considered a justification for hooking them up to the grid. Even though the guards should know they'd be reported missing and the cops would be sent to them for kidnapping. Predictably, when they get here, it's not full of picket fences and relaxation anymore. But not because Bender simply went around punching and stealing from everyone. Instead, he filled the place with fun, buildings, and his image. He's got a casino there and a circus. At least he's trying to make it more fun. He set up a game of 3-card Mont out of immediate boredom. Everyone fortunately loved it, so he set up a poker game. They still wanted more, and he kept giving it to them until they built all this. But what's the point of gambling when they won't have any money, because they're all retired? I guess they were gambling with food or drinks. The old lady says there's no homes anymore. Everyone lives in the casinos. And food is an all-you-can-eat buffet. But the buffet part sounds great. It's not all bad. He's trying to make the place more fun. What better way to make a place that's supposed to be heaven? Compared to Eggman, Bender's really merciful as a leader. He really believes in breads and circuses, even if it results in unappealing sights that he wouldn't like. As the place has a strip club too. Leela says he caused trouble, but the only trouble he caused was making everyone live in casinos instead of having homes to themselves. How can they have the money to spend at casinos anyways? Wouldn't everything be provided to them for free because of the simulation? I guess they get money conjured up by the simulation it's spent. Leela's told where Bender is, and that he named a ton of streets after himself. It's no wonder he took over the whole place. He's a robot with tons of competent abilities who's way more physically able than them. Too bad he wants someone kicked out for counting cards. Predictably, Leela's easily able to deal with Bender's goons because they're very old, very weak goons who are wheezing. That made me smile. Bender tells his goons to leave them be and says it's nice that they visited him, and wants to show them the casino. He's warned that old people can't take this kind of simulation for long. That's proven true when someone complains that he doesn't like all this noise, and Bender's a jerk by saying no complaining's allowed. It's still better than Robotropolis. Fry tells him to come home and gets told that if he can toss a ring over his head, he will, even though he could easily be lying. And Bender cheats by retracting his head to dodge, but of course he didn't want to get hit with it. He still says he's missed Fry and Leela even though they're being mean to him, and admits that while he does want to go home, the power's too addictive here. Fry tells everyone that Bender wants to hear stories about their grandchildren, so they all talk to him at once, which they'd know that anyone would hate. So they have to run away, and realistically they easily lose them. And for some reason Bender wants to run from the only person who could find a way out of here. He says he built this world to be a quiet paradise for the old, and because he hates how Bender ran this place, he'll show him the way out to get rid of him for good. They think the crazy looking sculpture he made of his grandson is the way out at first. That was also pretty charming. They walk out of the simulation with Bender thanking him, and wake up and try to escape. Somehow there's guards right there, as if they expected them to leave, when almost no one would be able to. Fry throws rings at them and is magically lucky enough to put the rings over them, even though the rings aren't big enough to get over their heads. Fry stops to write in his diary that this was his greatest moment and gets told to keep running because he's still in danger. And it's funny because this doesn't backfire on him. Instead they get home and Farnsworth says he's downloaded all of Bender's memories into a new body. So he's legally only a few minutes old, so he can work here again, and those Sunset Squad jerks will leave him alone. This has to be in a different universe from that comic issue where Bender was made an unperson because the old crew of Farnsworth came back. Because in that issue, Bender had to download himself into a backup Bender, and he never got his original body back. Amy nicely offers to throw him a party because it's technically his birthday. And when the cops show up because of the noise complaint, they're insulted and get tricked into beating up Bender's old body. Futurama comic, issue 40. For some reason, Bender's reading out a long list of things he wants for Xmas while sitting on a mall Santa's lap, even though Robot Santa's known for being evil. He wants an antenna extension, zoom-in cigars, and something cringeworthy. He's shoved off him for wasting people's time for 45 minutes and told to leave. The cops are here, but they're moonlighting as mall security to make enough money so they can't arrest them. This is the 5th time this month Bender did this thing I never saw him do before. And he should have known that the Mole Santas don't actually tell Robot Santa everyone's request because they'd just be killed by him. And what did they have to gain from sending him those requests by email that he'd never give them? Somehow Fry thinks Leela was being harsh by just telling him the truth. And the mall's gonna close in an hour when Fry still has gifts to buy. How could all of them make the mistake of waiting until 3 days before Xmas to buy their gifts? I thought most people bought their gifts months in advance. Leela's smartly going to a sale and says she'll meet him here in a half hour. Bender amuses me with his melodramatic singing. And fortunately, the Mole Santa apologizes to him and explains himself. I don't even know why there would still be Mole Santas in a world where Robot Santa's evil. He says there's so many people wanting a picture with Robot Santa for no reason that the malls are hiring extra robots. So he gives Bender a job. Bender's told they'd give him the job and free booze. Why would he be hired for any job when it's a criminal record and a reputation? Then he's told the blatant lie that any Mole Santa gets exempt from Robot Santa's wrath. He's desperate enough to believe it and thanks him and apologizes to him. And he's delusional that Robot Santa will give him what he wants for being great at imitating him instead of being mad that he's doing that. Even though Robot Santa is evil. Fry wants to surprise Leela with a candy cane perfume with an edible bottle. But he should have gotten a list of what she wanted too. Leela gets called by the professor on her wrist phone for a delivery mission. Let me guess. It's not their most dangerous mission yet, because they keep emphasizing that. Well, apparently it will be, since it's a delivery of sport equipment to the reindeer robots on the planet where Santa's workshop is. It can't be the actual Neptune, because it's a gas giant with really high gravity. What makes him think it's their most dangerous delivery yet? I mean, Robot Santa may be famous, but they've been on thousands of deliveries. The workshop is on the other side of the planet where the Deerbots hold their games at Antler Stadium. It's funny how he looks when he runs off, all hyper from an energy drink. Bender doesn't want to go because he's got his other job, and Leela looks like an idiot making a really bad excuse to get him to go with her. Instead of simply saying that he has tons of inherent abilities that would actually be useful and they'll be in danger without him. Zoidberg reveals that he's a bad cook too, but at least sounds more believable how his cooking's bad than Bender's. Somehow he misinterprets Fry's disgusted reaction to what the cookies are made of, and says that since he's been dealing with starvation all his life, he learned at a young age to cook using tons of food scraps. So he's hired to cook for the crew on the way there because he was their only option. I have a question. Why can't Farnsworth or Hermes cook? Why can't Leela or Fry cook? Surely one of them would have learned to cook and replaced Bender as the cook by now, after all the time they've been alive, especially Farnsworth. So this problem they're having is just annoying because it's not justified. He doesn't know where they want the food supplies put somehow. And he somehow thinks a pantry is a bathroom with the scented candles he likes to eat because he's an alien. He sees a lot of pretty lights in the ship and breaks the seatbelt with his claw by accident. It's refreshing to see Zoidberg on a Planet Express mission for once. Bender's gonna waste their time being very predictable as a Mole Santa. We get to see him throw Cubert on the floor for calling him a liar. Surprisingly, after Bender's rude to his coworker, he apologizes and says he's a method actor and it's hard to break character after his performance as Robot Santa. And if people want the Mole Santas to act like Robot Santa, that doesn't make any sense because the only reason they would want Mole Santas is to relive an ancient time where Santa was just considered a good guy. He's told not to remove his medal until after Xmas Day or Robot Santa won't be able to monitor all of his hard work. Gee, I wonder if the medal is not what it's said to be. It'd be more convincing if he said, you have to have the medal on or Robot Santa won't know to spare you. Fry's hungry and they decide to find Zoidberg. Leela set up the holo pilot she designed to take over for her until they get back. And it looks like a fat Amy, but she lies that it's not. Probably to avoid getting in trouble with Amy. It's still confusing because usually she's not afraid of her and insults her right back. Leela finds out Zoidberg ate all their food. He lies that he tripped and the food went in his mouth. Fry says he's gonna swear at him a lot, and for some strange reason it doesn't show us what he's gonna say when the series isn't above a lot of stuff. Fry gets told to stop when he makes him cry and apologizes, and says he can't remember the last time Zoidberg helped them. What about the times he saved them after they were sent to other planets by a porta potty? And if the comic issues are never canon to each other, well, it still runs off the show's canon, but he still has a good point because I can't remember any time Zoidberg was useful for them in the show. He hopes he'll get left behind, and because Leela doesn't reassure him when he tries to manipulate her, he decides to leave them, even though that'll just risk them wasting even more time on a dangerous planet looking for him. Since Zoidberg ate their supplies, now they need to find the Deerbots to deliver their package in person and barter for food in return. Zoidberg wanders out of the ship and wanders in the snow for hours, and then he sits on one of the Robot Santa's elves, who is running away because he doesn't want to make weapons. He wants to heal elves who get hurt on the assembly line from faulty bombs and guns. But Robot Santa said he's not allowed to do that, even though that's clearly a stupid idea that'll cut down on his worker amount. Zoidberg's happy to meet a doctor and tells him he'll tell him everything he knows, when he should know he's a bad doctor from all the feedback he got. And the elf should know he's a bad doctor because he makes it clear that people have told him off for being a terrible doctor and surgeon. I never got why the series thought this joke with them was necessary. It definitely doesn't work past the first episode. The future is even less likely to have a terrible doctor be kept on the payroll. He's told there's some people to nurse back to health after all, and there's escaped elves that were injured when Robot Santa tried to chase them down and somehow failed. He was the only one healthy enough to go search for supplies. This is a sad subplot. Gee, it sure is a relief that the Deerbots actually gave Fry and Leela some food and they delivered their weapons no problem. It's such a relief that they got back to the ship safely despite being told that they hunt humans. This was less predictable than them having a hard time getting back to the ship because the robots couldn't be trusted. Fry plans on giving some of the food to Zoidberg, and he tells Leela that Zoidberg stole Bender's hobo bindle. Wasn't it obvious it was Zoidberg? Leela decides to go after him with Fry. They lose his trail, and Leela looks through the window of Robot Santa's workshop where he's demonstrating his weapons. One of the elves says that Bender is one of his more passionate supporters. Robot Santa says that once he activates his Medal of Dishonors, he'll use the robots as an army against everyone on Earth. Why did he even say that, if both of them already know that? He's given the remote control in a gift. Zoidberg assumes the workers will build a hospital after he's actually thanked for helping the elves, as if he did a good job. And it looks like he did. I guess he did something that any normal person would be able to do. He's told they have no intention of making a hospital. The elf tells him to be quiet and says they needed him to get their strength back for a better mission, and they make him walk ahead of them. This is a twist, but at least it's less predictable than what I expected. Leela and Fry sneak into the workshop at night, and Fry gets told to not to bump into something or the whole place will explode. He tries to eat candy in a bowl and gets hit to cough them out, and she saves them from an explosion. The candy is plastic for wiring bombs, and I just have to assume the reason Robot Santa's already here is that the explosion was so loud that it woke him up. And he slept close enough to hear a panel later. It still seems ridiculous because I'd expect him to be asleep in bed. We should have been told it was night. Then an army of elves with guns show up to end Robot Santa's reign of terror. I'd be excited, but I don't know if the comic has the guts to actually retire this character once and for all. When he's been used enough, and the future's already depressing enough as it is without an evil Robot Santa. Zoidberg says he's missed his friends and is happy to be responsible for this. An elf takes the remote from Leela by surprise easily without even having to attack her first to loosen her grip. We see the reporter woman reveal that she wants a divorce from a cheating husband, and the Robot Santa activates the medals, and Fry gives Leela his Xmas gift out of despair. She says that's sweet, and throws it at the remote with an impressively accurate throw, making Zoidberg hungry enough from the scent to bite his hand. Somehow he wasn't stopped, despite giving him seconds of warning ahead of time. I assumed the candy cane would destroy the remote, but instead the acid in Zoidberg's stomach is gonna destroy the remote, reverting every Mall Santa back to normal. That was convenient. Good thing they brought Zoidberg along. Leela calls him a hero and apologizes to him. And he gets hit with the laser because he was focused on ranting, and gets satisfyingly attacked by the elves. I wish they weren't drawn smirking all the time, because they're the good guys here, revolting against their evil dictator. This story is about Farnsworth proving Bender's thousands of years old with carbon dating to prove the guess your age carnival game guy wrong, and then after some humorous jokes where he abuses the privileges of being considered old, he gets forced to go to the retirement planet for being old, even though he's clearly physically fit and a robot. Go figure, he's at an unfair advantage over everyone else, so he takes over the simulated world in an off-screen moment of awesome that skipped through in a series of flashbacks. At least he went out of his way to make a place that he'd find fun. The problems are that everyone has to live in the casinos now and they don't like all the noise. And he made complaining against the rules when he's gonna hear it from everyone eventually. I assume the simulated world was so small and the building materials were so rare that he had to get rid of the homes to make all of those buildings. But it could have easily just been improvements to the place if you had both homes for everyone and fun places for the people who, realistically, still enjoy having fun. Not every old person is the same way, and some of them did like the changes he made. But he just wasn't thick-skinned enough to deserve keeping the job. Still, for a guy who took over the world, it could have been a lot worse. This story was about Leela and Fry taking Zoidberg with them for no good reason on a mission to deliver Dearbots some sporting equipment. She should have said she thinks his claws will be useful. He eats all their food for the trip, so they have to make the delivery personally to barter for food. And since they called him out on what he did, he feels bad and runs away in the cold. They lose Zoidberg's trail and get threatened by Robot Santa in his workshop because he's conveniently awake at night and right there. But Zoidberg tended to the runaway elves and let them get back their strength through a bolt against Robot Santa and army. It was a twist that Zoidberg was a good doctor just so the army could properly take Robot Santa. And I guess it was a relief that the Mall Santas were only taken over for a little while and barely got to do any damage. I guess I just expected it to matter more. And it's about time Robot Santa had his workers revolt on him. But why did it have to be because he made an impossibly stupid decision?